Right, well here we are at the final module that we haven't taken a look at, and that is our insert module. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to bring in our first piece of footage, which is going to be the noisy room footage. Frame range 0 to 163, 25 frames a second, HD, no fields. Check that our frame offset is set to 1 here. Everyone's okay, right, okay. And let's just take a quick look at this. Now quite a bit of the insert module is going to be fairly familiar and fairly straightforward, simply because it's repeating some of the setup that we have in other modules. We can use it in a very, very straightforward sort of way, but there are some unique and very interesting features contained within the module. So let's take a quick look at our shot. Now you might think that we are going to track an image into this screen here, and yeah, we could do that, but actually I'm more interested in the first part of the shot here and tracking something else onto this this magazine, and you'll see why in just a few moments. So before we look at any of the features here, I'm going to just come to my track and create a new X-spline, and I'm going to just track this object here. So I've got quite a good shape to track. It's not completely flat, but it's going to be planar enough for our tracker here. So I'm going to call this magazine track, and let's just quickly go over our tracking things here. Luminance, yeah, it's black and white pretty much, that's fine. 90% we'll keep that there. Perspective we'll leave turned off. Shear should be able to manage this one. Large motion, yeah, all the rest of it leave as default, and we'll just quickly track this through. And I'm going to watch it as it disappears out. Let's just pause that a second. Let's take my minimum percentage of pixels used down to 40 so I can get this going a bit further. Keep it going and keep tracking single frames through. See that it's amazing, the shape is still holding really, really well without me changing the shape, just by reducing the percentage of pixels there. Gonna get a little bit tricky here. All right. Okay, but let's just leave that there. We could keyframe that out if we want to, but that's going to be good enough for now. So let's turn off the tracking here. Take a quick look at our surface. Bring this in here. Take that to the corners of our magazine. There we go, and just turn off the splines. Let's insert a clip here. We'll just do our regular logo. Let's take this just to the edge of our project here and zoom in so we can only see that section. Let's play that back. And that's looking fairly good. Let's hit stabilize at a good time. There we go. No problems whatsoever. Not that I expected any there. Now, the track is absolutely perfect, but you'll probably see that the problem has come with our shape not matching up entirely here. Now we're going to solve this soon. So what we've done before is we've then just taken out this tracking data, probably as 4-corner pin tracking data, into our compositing app and done the rest of the work there. With Mocha Pro, we can come into the Insert tab and we can actually start to insert clips directly within our Mocha Pro application. Now I'm going to stress that this isn't a replacement for the compositing app, but it is a great way of getting a lot of the work done before you even move into that stage. So while we're here, let's take a swift look through our parameters here. Now the input should be familiar by now. We have the background clip, so that's our main clip here. Currently that's set to noisy room. We have an alpha insert clip. So if we needed an alpha channel for our insert clip, this is where we would this way we specify it, we just import that and then bring that in the normal way. The same with the alpha for the background clip, we can just bring this in the same way too. So let's import another clip into here. Let's go import, choose, and let's find my Walking with Surfboard here. That's all fine. Hit import. And there we go, that's brought that in there. So the first one here is ROI, or region of interest, and we're going to come and have a look at that a bit later. Now what I want to have a look at first is the insert here. So in the comp, this is dealing with how we're comping the things together, and we've got some kind of basic controls over that. We can change the opacity up and down as we want to. We can change the gain up and down if we need to. Now I use this mainly for take that back to 1. Now I use this mainly for preview purposes, and then turn these back up to 1 and 1 here when I take this out to do the final comp in the compositor. We have blurs. We've got actually 2 blurs. Let's zoom in a little bit on here. We have our focus blur. Let's take this and we'll hit render over here. And the focus blur just puts a regular blur on our surface, so we can attempt to mimic any focus blur that's going on there. This is all keyframeable, of course. We wanted just a little blur there just to send that out. So motion blur is a really useful one here. What motion blur is going to do is obviously try to compensate for the natural motion blur that's going on when so it generates up a nice motion blur to try and match that in a little bit better. So stop on that. And depending on your source footage, the default of 0.25 might be too little or too much. Let's take this to 0.1 and see what we've got there. You probably see that quite nicely just by comparing it to other objects that are around and about. And let's just render that backwards again. Turn the overlays off, just have a little look. Obviously we're still missing the grain and such, but that's you can see that with the areas with the motion blur are matching in obviously a lot better than the areas without the motion blur. All right, let's move on a little bit more. Let's turn my motion blur off here, just to speed things up a little bit. Anti-aliasing. Well, let's take a little look at the edges here. I've got anti-aliasing turned off. Let's render out a frame. And you can see that we get that lovely staircasing here along the edges. Turn my anti-aliasing back up, render out that frame again. Those edges are now nice and smooth. If you think that anti-aliasing is too high, you bring it down, you re-render. If you think it's too low, we can adjust it up. Now obviously the more you anti-alias, you are blurring stuff out a little bit here. So the default version of the default value of 1 is actually a pretty good compromise between sharpness and getting rid of the staircasing. Enhance edges is just a way to add a little sharpen onto the edge. You can see, there we go, we're now enhancing all of the edges within our insert there. So it's basically adding a sharpen on there. I'm going to leave that turned off for now. Now the really interesting one that we want to take a look at now is our warp. So this is really cool. We could, obviously use the motion tracking data to track in our object and then perform warping within our compositing tool. But let's turn my overlays back on. We've also got a warp directly within Mocha Pro. We've got several different levels here. Now these correspond to how detailed our mesh is going to be. So we can start at layer 1 or level 1 and just match that in, get the sort of simplest things all matched up, though of course a lot of that will have been done already by our surface if we set the surface up correctly. Level 2 divides that a bit further, so we can come in and let's start matching our paper here. It's probably a good time to turn the opacity down. And the gain up just a little bit. There we go. And we don't have to just warp the edges, we can warp inside as well. Zoom in slightly just to get a bit more edge here. Of course, you can see we've got we're starting to match that edge of that magazine now a lot more, where the paper's sort of all ruffled up. We can sort of work our way up into more and more complexity. There we go, and you get the point. We could play around with this forever, but you get the point there. Let's just take our opacity and our gain back to where they're meant to be. Turn the show mesh back off again. And we've now matched that in quite nicely. Let's render that frame. Cool, and that's matching up with the magazine edge pretty nicely there as well. So we turn on motion blur as well. The illusion is complete. Cool, and that's matching really nicely. Cool, so that's our first part of the insert there. The other bit we've got, and this is something that was, depending on which compositor you're working on, this could be more or less tricky to achieve at the compositing stage, and that's your offset tracking. So we can offset it either X or Y. We can also rotate it up if we need to. Now watch what's happening here is that as we're rotating, let's try and bring it there. The rotation is happening downstream of the stuff that's over here, so it's happening downstream of the warp. So that's worth noting. So if we're going to use the warp and you need your image to be moved in a different way, you're going to have to think about that before you get to this stage. So coming in and moving the four corners of the surface around 90 degrees, or even rendering out your footage at 90 degrees different, as we've actually done here. We can also scale this up and do all the fun things that you would expect us to be able to do without offset. So again, let's play this back so we can preview this in real time. Loads of this stuff we can actually preview without rendering. It's just some of the blurring stuff that we need to render up first. Cool, so it's really easy to offset our image at this point here. Obviously it's sliding back in there because we are looking at our composite here. Let's go back to the original noisy room here. And that way we don't see the renders. We just see our offset track. Alright, okay, so let's move back here and we'll just reset all of these to 0 and 0 and 0. Scale is 1. Cool, and we're back to where we were. Shear and perspective. That's what you'd expect. Shear. And change our perspective. Oops, and if we go too far, it's not going to like us. So it's going to tell us that we actually can't get a nice, stable or legal warp there. Great, so it's really easy to do offset tracking within the insert module. The next one is the 3D offset. Now this is actually quite hard to pull off in a lot of the compositing apps. Let's turn this on and just see what happens here. So the first thing that happens when I turn on 3D offset is we get little points shooting out from our corners. Again, this is a downstream effect. So with the depth, we can then move this page up or down. Turn the overlays off, hit play. And this will calculate the 3D offset, the depth offset for our shot without any tinkering around doing any sort of clever expressions or clever maths. It's doing it all there for us. And we can also rotate. Now the rotate won't do anything until we hit tilt, and then at that point the rotate is giving us the angle of that tilt. Let's set this even more, bring that out there and hit play. So you can see that's holding steady as a rock and giving us a really nice 3D offset of our image. Cool, I like that. Let's rotate that up a bit as well. And send it back just using the scale. See what we can do here. Lovely, and of course I added loads of keyframes there, which is not what I intended, but actually shows that you can add keyframes if you want to a fantastic artistic result that I have there. Let's reset all of that, delete all the keyframes here. Another nice new feature is when we go to reset a parameter here, it's actually telling us what our parameter we are going to be resetting is. Now again, the great thing is you don't have to do your compositing within Mocha Pro. This isn't designed to be a replacement for your compositing app. So we can now export this offset data and take it out to all of the same applications as we could before. And it works in exactly the same way. It's just offset. Cool. Now, if we did want to export that out, we can render out the clip using the output clip here. And let's just do that. Let's render out this one frame. There we go. Another thing we can do here as well is render out a matte clip. So let's take our next frame up here and just render that out. So if we take a look at the first thing we rendered out, which was our full composite here, we've got everything, the original frame, including the new insert here. But if we look at the matte clip, we've also got just the screen insert in there as well. And there it is. So we can have it with or without. So this is great for when we come to do our final compositing within whatever compositing app we're using. So we're not, relying on the tool set within Mocha Pro to do everything that includes, any of the color grading or any of the other stuff. We can do that all at the later stage. This is just feeding us the raw data.